Before the blade ever touched her neck, Marie Antoinette's fate had already been sealed. Ending her life wasn't enough. Her identity had to be wiped away, turned into a public spectacle of humiliation. The once radiant Archduchess of Austria, who had lit up Versailles with her laughter, was now being forced to walk backward from the splendor of a golden throne to the rough wooden cart reserved for the condemned. In the early hours of August 2nd, 1793, while Paris hid beneath heavy silence, she was ripped from her family's arms. Torn from her children, denied even a moment of comfort, she was carried to the Conciergerie, a damp prison that Parisians grimly nicknamed the waiting room of the guillotine. There was no queen anymore, only prisoner number 280. Her new court consisted of rats, sweating stone walls, and 2 guards who stared without blinking. Every movement was recorded, every attempt at dignity blocked. Time no longer followed clocks. It was measured by the thud of guard boots and the distant murmur of the Seine. Marie Antoinette lived in a cramped, soaked cell where moisture clung to everything. A pile of straw served as her bed. A single candle became her only companion. A wooden screen half divided the room where she was expected to dress. But even this faint privacy was forbidden. 2 soldiers stood watch day and night, denying her the right to be unseen. She slept under their eyes. She ate under their eyes. The surveillance wasn't merely control, it was a reminder that she was no longer queen, no longer mother, barely even considered human. One memory remained painfully alive, her son, Louis Charles. Only a month earlier, revolutionaries had stormed his room past midnight. Marie Antoinette had thrown herself over him, pleading desperately. He's only a child. Her cries meant nothing. Guards tore her away as the terrified 8-year-old was dragged from her arms. His screams stayed trapped inside her mind, replaying endlessly in darkness. She would never see him again. Something inside her cracked that night. Among the handful of objects she hid from guards, she kept a tiny portrait of her son and a lock of his hair tucked inside her corset. Her only source of human kindness was Rosalie Lamorlière, a young servant assigned to care for her. Rosalie later confessed the queen only broke down when she spoke of her children. Then the facade of royalty fell away, revealing a devastated mother whispering her children's names like a prayer. Her captors mocked her, taunted her with crude comments, laughed about her executed husband. Every insult was meant to wound. Every silence was her attempt to resist. But in that suffocating cell, Marie Antoinette began bending her pain into defiance. She learned to move slowly, speak softly, show no fear. Those watching expected a shattered woman. Instead, they saw someone who, even stripped of crown and title, still carried strange, unspoken authority. Sometimes when others slept, she stared at her candle's trembling flame. In its faint glow, she replayed her entire life. The grand balls, embroidered gowns, her children laughing in palace gardens, and the rising tide of resentment swelling outside Versailles. When had they stopped being people and become symbols of hatred? No answer ever arrived, only dawn, and with it, another day inside that tiny stone coffin. So, 76 days passed, 76 dawns without hope. In the dim hours before dawn on October 14th, 1793, the iron door swung open. This time to drag her before the revolution's version of justice, a justice already carved in stone before she entered the room. Marie Antoinette was led through corridors, surrounded by armed soldiers. Their boots echoed like distant funeral drums. She wore the same black dress she had used to mourn her executed husband. Yet her steps remained calm, almost unnervingly composed. The revolutionary tribunal, crammed with spectators, looked more like a stage than a courtroom. Flickering torches lit up judges' faces, rigid and expressionless as carved marble. Across from them, on a plain wooden bench, sat the woman who had once been Queen of France. No jewels, no crown. Only a thin, pale figure with ghost-like dignity that refused to break. Prosecutor Antoine Fouquier-Tinville opened proceedings with a voice meant for spectacle. His words dripped with malice, every sentence crafted to provoke roars from the crowd. He listed accusations with theatrical precision. Treason, conspiring with foreign enemies, wasting the nation's money, corrupting France's morals. Every phrase drew waves of cheers, jeers, and pounding fists. But no one cared about facts. The revolution needed a villain, a body on which to pin years of hunger, taxation, and war. Marie Antoinette, denied proper counsel and given no time to prepare, spoke only when allowed. Her voice was quiet, but steady. She denied the charges, not with outrage, but with the exhaustion of someone who already knew the outcome could not be altered. Witnesses filed in, one after another. Some recited tales lifted from hate-filled pamphlets, others invented stories on the spot. They spoke of decadent feasts, excesses at Versailles. The audience howled with approval. Then came the accusation that froze the entire room. The prosecutor announced the vilest charge, that she had committed incest with her own son. A chilling silence swept over the tribunal. Even some hardened revolutionaries dropped their gaze. Little Louis Charles, ripped from her arms months before, had been coerced into signing a false confession, coached to repeat horrifying phrases he couldn't comprehend. For a moment, Marie Antoinette didn't move. She seemed carved from stone, staring into nothing. Then she rose. She didn't look at the prosecutor or jury. Instead, she turned toward the women in the back, market women, mothers, the same ones who had marched to Versailles demanding bread. In a voice as clear as a bell, she said only, "I appeal to all the mothers who are here." A wave went through the crowd, murmurs, gasps, even tears. For an instant, the monstrous caricature from pamphlets vanished, replaced by truth. A mother torn from her child, humiliated beyond comprehension. Tinville, furious at the shift in mood, slammed his fist and forced proceedings onward. But something had cracked. Marie Antoinette sank back, drained. That single moment had taken the last of her strength. The trial dragged on for 2 days. At dawn on October 16th, judges announced the verdict, guilty of high treason. The sentence, death by guillotine. The clerk asked if she had anything to say. She simply shook her head and whispered, "What more could I add?" Yet in that moment, her quiet acceptance became its own form of resistance. No screaming, no begging, no bitterness. Only a woman standing straighter than the men who condemned her. Night fell over Paris on October 15th, casting deceptive calm over cell number 280. Marie Antoinette returned from trial pale and trembling, yet her gaze seemed strangely peaceful. Not the peace of hope, but of someone who had fully embraced the end. Rosalie stayed close, offering broth and bread. The Queen refused with a gentle smile. "I need nothing more, my child. Everything is finished for me." She picked up a quill and sheet of paper. Her hand shook, but her script remained steady. She wrote a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. In that letter, she wrote nothing of vengeance, fear, or injustice. She wrote of forgiveness. She begged her sister-in-law to care for her daughter, to pray for little Louis Charles, and never hold him responsible for the words he had been forced to repeat. "Tell him I do not blame him. Tell him I pray for him. Tell him that even in heaven, I will still be his mother." With every sentence, her spirit slowly pulled away from her tired body. The letter became her moral testament, her final whisper to the world. But her message never reached its intended hands. Revolutionaries seized it and buried it in their archives, where it remained hidden for more than 2 decades. When she placed the quill down, she stared at the candle barely clinging to life. Melted wax trailed across the table like falling tears. Rosalie broke down. "Do not cry," the Queen told her softly. "We must die as we have lived, decently." At midnight, footsteps returned. The last order had arrived. Guards delivered it with a tone so cold and ordinary, it could have been a breakfast announcement. Marie Antoinette only nodded. No plea for mercy, no tremor of fear. Before they shut the door, she asked for one moment alone. Kneeling, she prayed, not for herself, but for her children. By the time she rose, dawn was slipping through the crack in the wall. Paris was waking up, indifferent to her sorrow. Before drifting into brief sleep, Rosalie heard her murmur, "May God give me the strength to die with courage." Then the candle went out. Its final glow hovered in darkness, like a fading promise. On the morning of October 16th, 1793, Paris awoke under heavy, icy fog. In cell 280, the former queen stirred before guards arrived. She had slept only a few minutes. Rosalie appeared with swollen eyes and a cup of water. "Would you like breakfast, Your Majesty?" Marie Antoinette gently shook her head. "No, once I am gone, I need nothing more. My soul has fed enough on sorrow." At precisely 6 in the morning, the locks shifted. The door opened. 3 men entered. A clerk, a National Guard officer and executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson with his assistants. Everything had been arranged down to the smallest gesture, a ritual of stripping away her last fragments of dignity. A guard informed her she must change clothes, remove the black mourning dress. That dress was more than fabric. It was her memory, her symbol. She quietly asked for privacy. "Sir, please allow me at least that." The guard laughed. "There are no queens here." She was forced to change behind a poorly placed screen while they watched. They handed her a plain, rough white linen gown, the color worn by penitents on the brink of death. When she finished, Sanson stepped forward. "Your hair must be cut, madam." She didn't protest, simply bowed her head. An assistant grabbed rusty scissors and brutally hacked off strands of her hair. White strands fell to the floor like fragments of her past. Once blonde, her hair had turned pale in prison, bleached by grief and time. The cutting was not just preparation. It was a ritual of erasing her womanhood. When it was over, a guard approached holding thick rope. "We must bind your hands." Marie Antoinette looked up stunned. "Why? My husband, the king, was not bound." Her voice was not rebellious, only sorrowful. No answer was given. Her wrists were tied so tightly the rope bit into her skin. She swallowed a sound of pain. Before leaving, she made a request, once unimaginable for a queen. "May I relieve myself for a moment?" They nodded with disdain. Humiliation was complete. When she stepped back, Sanson said solemnly, "We must go." Marie Antoinette paused before Rosalie. The young woman trembled, unable to speak. The queen looked at her with tenderness. "Do not weep for me. I have suffered too much to fear death. God bless you." Then she walked toward the corridor. As she approached, guards removed their hats. No one dared meet her eyes. It wasn't fear. It was involuntary respect. When she reached the main gate, she saw the cart waiting. An open, rough wooden wagon, the same kind used for criminals and thieves. There were no exceptions for her. Her husband had been taken to his death in a closed carriage. She was offered up for display. The morning air bit sharply. Bells of Notre Dame blended with rising shouts of people already filling the streets. She climbed into the cart without help, her wrists still bound. For a brief moment, she lifted her face toward the grey sky, inhaled deeply and whispered words only Rosalie could hear. "Now my peace begins." The cart began to roll through the crowd. Jeers, insults, and laughter chased after her. But she stood motionless, upright as though she no longer belonged to the living world. The wooden cart creaked through Paris streets. Inside it, Marie Antoinette stood tall, the wind tugging at her plain white gown and freshly cut hair. The slow ride lasted just over an hour. For thousands crowding the roadsides, it became a procession. They wanted to witness her fall. Some hurled insults, others tossed stale bread. "There goes the widow Capet," they shouted, "the Austrian, the thief of France." Yet what disturbed most bystanders wasn't her presence, it was her silence. She did not react. She did not bow her head. She did not cry. Her expression remained composed, her posture unbent, her gaze fixed far ahead. The cold wind blew through her cropped hair, but she stood unshaken. Her profile that day did not reflect arrogance, but a solemn, unsettling calm. A woman who had already made peace with her ending. From a balcony, Jacques-Louis David, the painter of the Revolution, opened his sketchbook. He traced her outline, the long neck, the firm jaw, the hollow yet serene eyes. That sketch would become one of the most iconic depictions of her downfall. The cart continued along Rue Saint-Honoré, guarded by lines of soldiers. Windows opened and slammed shut as it passed. The cart jolted violently over a stone. Marie Antoinette stumbled, nearly falling. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. But, without aid, she straightened herself, lifting her chin as though nothing had happened. The market women watched her closely. Some smirked cruelly, others stared silently. "She doesn't look afraid," one whispered. "Perhaps she has nothing left to lose," another murmured back. The journey felt endless. The city's noise crashed around her like a storm, yet inside she was still. For the first time in years, she felt free. Free from the court, from politics, from venomous rumors, from expectations, even from fear itself. Then the cart turned a final corner and the scene opened before her. The Place de la Révolution. In the center, towering against the pale sky, stood the guillotine. Its dark wooden frame and gleaming metal blade cut a harsh silhouette in the midday light. A massive crowd pressed around the platform, buzzing with anticipation. Marie Antoinette lifted her chin. For a moment, everything else disappeared. She understood that everything she had ever been would end on that wooden platform. The cart stopped. Executioner Charles-Henri Sanson stepped down first. One assistant offered his hand to help her descend. She met his eyes and replied softly, "No, thank you. I can manage on my own." With her wrists bound and her feet steady, she climbed down from the cart amid the thunder of the crowd. Every step toward the wooden staircase echoed like the closing notes of a tragic symphony. The square thundered with shouts, fists in the air, mocking laughter and cold fascination. The guillotine loomed above, silent and ready, its blade glinting under the sun. Marie Antoinette stared at it. There was no terror in her eyes, only a remarkable, almost otherworldly calm. She ascended the steps slowly. Her tied hands made her movements shaky, yet she refused assistance. Executioner Sanson stepped forward to guide her, and in that instant fate played its last cruel trick. As she turned, her foot brushed against his. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Just before she spoke her final words, clear, soft, almost gentle. "Forgive me, sir. I did not do it on purpose." No scream, no curses, no desperate pleading. Just an apology so simple, so human, that it stunned even those who had come to celebrate her death. That small, humble gesture became her last triumph. In that single breath, the woman stripped of her crown, her children, her identity, even her name, reclaimed the one thing her enemies could never confiscate: her dignity. The assistants laid her on the wooden plank. The air around the scaffold tightened with anticipation. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice erupted. "Long live the Republic!" Thousands roared back in unison. Sanson gave the signal. The mechanism snapped, a harsh metallic sound. A heartbeat later, the blade fell with ruthless precision. Her body went still. The executioner lifted her head by its pale hair, raising it before the masses. A violent cheer rolled across the square. Long live the nation. Long live liberty. For them, it was the victory of the revolution. For her, it was release. Some witnesses later whispered they had seen something unusual, an expression of peace lingering on her face, a calm that seemed untouched by violence. Her body was placed into a covered cart alongside the remains of those executed before her. No rites, no prayers, no coffin. She was taken to the Madeleine Cemetery and thrown into a mass grave among strangers. There were no flowers to mark the spot, no cross to honor her name, only soil and silence. The crowd eventually dispersed. The thud of marching boots faded. But her story didn't end there. They buried her like a criminal, but her memory refused to stay underground. That quiet apology to her executioner, whispered in the face of death, slowly transformed into a symbol. Proof that even in the depths of cruelty, humanity can endure. Marie Antoinette, the foreign queen blamed for every misfortune, died with a grace that no blade could destroy. The guillotine claimed her life, but not her spirit. In the moment the steel struck her neck, her dignity rose above the crowd's roar, above the hatred, above her own tragic era. In that single eternal second, she reclaimed her true throne. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe. Share with those who love history. Thank you for listening. See you next time.